Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about um, Dungeons and Dragons from the perspective of theology, and how Dungeons and Dragons, quite literally, is posed with exactly the same questions as every evangelical church, and how they're making their decisions in context to churches similarly, right? And I think there's a powerful bond between Dungeons and Dragons and theology. Now, first of all, when I tell you there's a powerful bond between Dungeons and Dragons and theology, I don't think that's really a debatable subject. Literally every single setting of Dungeons and Dragons, except Dark Sun, which has been very famously, very purposefully excluded from Fifth Era Dungeons and Dragons. Um, and was excluded from first. It wasn't even around in first edition. It was excluded in third edition, and then it was brought. So Dark Sun only existed in second and fourth era, right? But every other setting of Dungeons and Dragons talks about theology. It talks about pantheons. It talks about the relationship of the player character to gods, right? Like it quite literally is involved in theology, right? But I actually think that people don't understand this, but Dungeons and Dragons really functions as a secular church. And you're like, hey, Scott, that's a pretty unusual thing to say. There's literally a guy here on YouTube. He's like D&D sermon of the week. Like he like half of his videos are themed with D&D at church in the same title or in the same thumbnail. It's not just me saying this anymore. Increasingly, everything I say, others join. They just join slowly, right? It's pretty powerful. Let's get into this. All right. So, how is Dungeons and Dragons like a secular church? All right. Well, here's a big one. So the 2024 core rulebooks, the infinite core rulebooks, right? That will end editions not just for Dungeons and Dragons, but for every engaged tabletop role playing game company in the world. I don't think you'll ever see another edition for any. No company that knows what they're doing in tabletop role playing games will ever publish a second edition of anything in the future, right? Editions are finished, right? And the reason why is Dungeons and Dragons is like you don't need editions. It's the player's handbook. It's 1974 player's handbook. It's the 1984 player's handbook. It's the 1994 player's handbook. It's the 2004 player's handbook. It's the 2014 player's handbook. It's the 2024 player's handbook. We're just printing it in a different year, right? But there is only one D&D, and this is a powerful, important, very important language change that needs to be embraced for peace. Not a joke. Like literally, edition wars. Like if you Google that phrase, you will find a lot of content on the edition wars. Like we want this for peace, right? So so where are the Infinite Edition core rulebooks? Where is the 2024 Infinite PHB? How is it like an evangelical church? Well, when they built it, they had to think about seeker or saved. What? So this is a big discussion in this is a very big discussion in every evangelical church, right? So we get together on Sunday and we're like, hey, how do we structure this church? We really want new people to come here, and we want them to, we want people to come here, and we want them to be saved, right? And so we want seekers to come to this church, right? So what does that mean? We're gonna do a sermon on how to get saved, right? And when people arrive, we'll tell them right away how to get saved, and that way they'll be welcome, right? You're like, well, wait, Pastor. What about me? I've been saved for 10 years. I don't want you to talk about how to get saved. I'm already saved. I need to tell you to tell me how to be sanctified, how to love my wife better, how to love my children better. And I don't need the low level stuff, right? I need the deep level stuff. I want you getting into, you know, Daniel chapter 4 verse 3, right? And getting into like really specific, like deep lore, right? The deep stuff, right? And the pastors were like, well, if I just talk about stuff that you need an MDiv to understand, if any seekers roll up in here, they're going to be confused and they're going to leave, right? And they're like, well, if you keep explaining every single term that you talk about with all this freight, you talk very slowly, right? And they had the same issue in the Infinite Core PHP. Do they make it 99 pages long, make it extremely inviting, make it very simple, and draw in new people, right? And they don't scare them off, right? Somebody watches season 5 of Stranger Things and they're like, oh, look at this super slim, inviting volume on the shelves, the player's handbook. Wow, I could read that in a weekend, right? Or do they build it for the save, the people who have been playing D&D for 10 years, right? That's what they did. They did 10 year. They did 10 year, right? They're like, it's 380 pages long. It's longer than it was before. It's more options, more complicated. So, and this is a tough decision, right? And so when they built the Infinite Edition, they had the same question. Do we pursue seekers or do we pursue the saved? And they answered the saved. And I will tell you right now, most evangelical churches are making the same decision. Why? Who puts money in the plate? Who keeps these places open, right? There you go. I think the answer might be the same for a secular church and for a sacred church. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.